Okay, this video is going to be a follow-up to the previous one I did about Puerto Rican ancestry results from 23andMe. Now, this video I'm going to cover Ancestry versus 23andMe because I know a lot of people are confused. They think, they ask, I should say, which one should I take? Should I take 23andMe? Should I take Ancestry? And what are the differences? And I wanted to get into the differences. At the end of the video, I'll get into which one I feel is better, but I want to break down the differences between the two of them. I took both tests, so I'm going to show both of my results. Okay, so these are my results for Ancestry DNA. Okay, so at the top we got Portugal and we got Spain. Now, similar to 23andMe, Portugal and Spain equals the same thing for people of my background, for Puerto Ricans. So it doesn't mean that necessarily half of my European comes from Portugal and the other half comes from Spain. It's one and the same. It's the same people. It's the Iberian Peninsula. Now I have indigenous Puerto Rico, which equals the Taino Native Americans. That's not much of a surprise. We know that that was the Native American group that was on the island. They came from South America thousands of years prior to that. I'll get into that as a second as we go down. Now we have Northern Africa. Now Northern Africa, as I stated in the other video, is a little tricky because Puerto Ricans, for the most part, their ancestry from Spain comes via the Canary Islands. Now, before the Spaniards got to the Canary Islands, there was another group of people living there called the Guanches, who were descendants of the Arabic Mozabite Berbers. So that's why you have North African. I got it at 5%. I think 23andMe is very similar. I think I have the same stat for that one. Now, the thing about Northern Africa is it's complicated. It might not be the Guanches. That's the theory. That's the assumption if you have Canarian ancestry. But there were also the Moors. There were also Arabic Mozabite Berbers who were in Spain for a long time before the Reconquest, before the Crusades and all of that stuff. They were there for a while. So it could be from that. It could also be from Sephardi Jewish ancestry. That's another thing that it could be from. And then you also have there's Northern Africa and Southern Spain have very, very close proximity. So it could be very, very old Northern African DNA from way back when, before they went up into Spain. The thing about that is that, it's hard to figure out what's what. They can't really separate these two, not yet at least. So it could be a number of reasons, more than likely it's one of them, if not all of them. So that's that. Now we go to Basque. Basque is also part of Spain. Now I do have Basque ancestry through my paternal grandfather, so that 3% may or may not be accurate. It's possible. But either way, it comes back to Spain. Now we have European Jewish. Now the European Jewish that's a tricky one. That could be, as far as I know, let me try to open this up. Let me see what we get here. What the European Jewish comes up from. Okay. Europe, Northern Africa, Central Asia, Middle East. Okay, Ashkenazi, Sephardi. Okay. Well, I don't know how accurate it is. I mean, I would assume it's Sephardi because I have Spanish ancestry, so it's going to go back to Spain anyway. So my assumption is that European Jewish goes back to Spain. We have Ireland and Scotland. Now, this is another one that confuses people when you get Ireland and Scotland. Now, in my particular case, I have ancestry through my maternal grandmother that goes back to Galicia, Spain. So that's up all the way up in the north, and those people share some ancestry with Ireland and Scotland because of how far up north they are. Even though they're predominantly Spanish, or they have Iberian DNA, they still have Irish and Scottish DNA, and English for that matter too. So that's, in my case, that's probably where it's from. But again, it still goes back to Spain. Now Senegal and Nigeria, that comes via the slave trade. Now we have England and Wales, Northern Europe. Now that goes back to Galicia, at least in my case, and I think it's in the case of a lot of people, unless you had some ancestry from England, which is, I mean, it's possible there was some English down there as well as Irish, as well as let me scroll back up, the Scottish. So it's possible that comes from those places too, but it's not likely unless it was fairly recent ancestry that you could trace back to those countries that went to Puerto Rico. That's probably the situation with that. So now we have Cameroon, Congo, Southern Bantu people. That's via the slave trade. Indigenous Americas, Mexico. Now I don't have any Mexican ancestry. Now this is, again, with the Native Americans. This is the thing. The Taino Native Americans were related to all those southern Native Americans in South America and to Mexico. So it's really from the Taino Native Americans when you see Mexico, unless you have Mexican ancestry. Benin and Togo, that's slave trade. Indigenous Cuba, same situation. The Tainos were in Cuba, Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico. So it's not that I have Cuban ancestors. It's all Taino Native American. Same thing goes for Colombia. Colombia and Venezuela. Now the thing about the Tainos, they originally came from South America. That's why you see that 1%. Not because you necessarily have Colombian ancestry unless you are Colombian. Greece and Balkans and Italy. This all goes back to Spain. It's still Southern European unless you have, again, a paper trail that leads back to Italy that's fairly recent, because if it's more than 3 generations, it's probably not even going to show up. So you had the Romans in Spain for a very long time. That's why you're going to get Italy. That's why Greek and Balkans, you're gonna get, that's gonna come up in these tests. That's the thing about Ancestry. It shows a lot of deep ancestry. 23andMe is more recent ancestry, so that's why you get a lot more countries when you're looking at this. Also, it doesn't tell you, you got to add everything up. 23andMe is different. It shows you, okay, you're X amount European, and then you see all the sub countries. You see all the countries they're from. This doesn't do that. Everything is broken down individually by percentages. So I don't know. I personally don't like that. I don't know how anybody else feels. Now you see Puerto Rico, obviously. Okay, so these are my results for 23andme.com. So as you can see, it breaks down the European total by percentage, and then it has the countries underneath that. I actually prefer this style as opposed to Ancestry. So we have Spanish and Portuguese, just like Ancestry had it. It actually has the countries too, not the countries. I'm sorry, the regions of Spain. And Canary Islands is my number one, which is actually very accurate because my father's side of the family, that's where they come from. So I was actually surprised at how accurate that was. And it's also got a bunch of other regions. I'm not gonna get into that. I don't think it's for this video. I don't think it's necessary. But same situation, Spanish and Portuguese. Now, like I said prior, Spanish and Portuguese, it's one and the same. It's the same Iberian Peninsula, same exact thing. Got the Italian, same situation. Unless you have a recent paper trail, that Italian is probably old Roman DNA. A lot of the Spaniards have some level of Italian in them, and it's usually very low, but it's there. Southern European, that goes back to Spain. Northwestern European, we discussed. Same thing, Ashkenazi Jewish, we discussed that. Native American. It puts it all together. Not like Ancestry had all those bunch of Native American groups. Native American, as you can see, it's one group. It's the Taino Native Americans from Puerto Rico. Sub-Saharan African, it does the same thing. It groups them all together. I think on Ancestry, I think it was between 6 and 7 on Sub-Saharan. Over here, 6.2. More or less the same thing. That comes via the slave trade. And we go down to Western and North African. Pretty much the same thing. 4.8. It was 5 on the other one. Same thing. Guanches or Moors or Sephardi Jewish people. Or just the fact that it was, in close proximity to Northern Africa, old Northern African DNA. It's the cradle of the Mediterranean race. So that's it's pretty much the answer to that. See, the thing about 23andMe is it has a lot of unassigned. You see, it's 4.6 unassigned. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's Kryptonian. I have no idea. But Ancestry doesn't have any unassigned. They assign everything. Some people prefer that. I don't really feel one way or the other about it. So it's depends on your preference. Now we're going to scroll down. You see Puerto Rico there, obviously. Now, I stated in the previous video that I did, I don't get caught up in this thing right here. The generation, when did your ancestors, because you're talking about multi-generational mixed people. So the Native American and the African has been recycled throughout numerous generations on both sides. So very difficult to pinpoint when your pure African ancestor or pure Taino Native American ancestor was. Spanish is a little different story, much more recent. I know exactly when my family came from Spain. I did a lot of research into that, so that's accurate. After that, I mean, good luck figuring all that other stuff out. It's very, very difficult when it comes to Hispanics, Latin Americans. But that's Now this is my parents, so you can see I inherited half from each side. You could see that my mother was much more European than my father. And my father was more Native American than her, and he had a little bit more African than her. He also had Northern African, more Northern African, because his family was all from the Canary Islands. Now, my mother's side of the family, particularly my paternal grandfather, his family was from all over Spain, like literally every part of Spain. His family was from. So my grandmother was her family's from Galicia and also from the Canary Islands. So this actually makes a lot of sense. It's actually, in my case, because I've done a lot of research, it's fairly accurate. Unless you have the documented stuff, it gets a little difficult. I mean, I give you a rough idea, but that's why it helps to do a combination of DNA and, if you can, do the actual genealogist stuff. It helps a lot to put everything together. You get a much more clearer picture. So that's pretty much it. Those are the differences between the two. I personally like 23andMe more just because it's not as deep ancestry, so you don't get a bunch of countries, and that's where it becomes very, very confusing, especially if you're a novice. I've been doing this for a long time, so I get it, but it's hard. If you just started, you have no clue. It's kind of overwhelming. So I would recommend 23andMe. I also like the way they display. They break down your X amount European, X amount African, X amount Middle Eastern. I prefer that than having to add up all the numbers of all the different countries and then come up with your number for for races. So that's pretty much it. I hope this helped people out. I hope it gave them a better understanding between the two companies, especially Puerto Ricans that are looking to take this test. If you have any questions, feel free to comment. Like, share, subscribe. This is Mike from Bensonhurst. Keep banging.